Hey, what's going on, guys? Indy here with Ultimate Tour Reviews, and today we're taking a look at the three generations of Brunt work boots. Sort of three. There's a couple other generations out there too. They did a not made in the USA Goodyear welted one too. I think they did like a one-off water. There's a couple of one-off kind of stuff they did, and of course they did a few different colors as well too. But behind me is kind of the basic, Gen 1, Gen 2, and now the Gen 3 Goodyear welted, made in the USA Marin. So let's take a closer look and kind of compare and contrast these three different types of boots. All right, so all the way to my right here is going to be the original Marin. I know in a couple of previous videos I used to say Marlin, but it's pronounced Marin, so I got that down. Now, the biggest complaint, and honestly, where I give Brunt a lot of credit here, because a lot of companies will not do this, is when I talked about this first boot, I was not a fan of it. It really was awful in most situations because you were just sliding around. It actually did a whole video on this kind of showing off how slippery these boots really were, and I really haven't worn this boot at all. Since I had some issues with it sliding around when it was wet, so you kind of get up in my metal trailer here, it was a pain in the butt with this one boot. Overall, the comfort was great on these boots. I think they held up pretty decent too. By the way, these are all comp toe boots. I always wear comp toes, and I just found the boot to be pretty substandard. Now, the price point of these things has always been around 150 bucks or so. The new version here, the made in the USA with the Goodyear Welt comp toe, is going to run you almost 300 bucks. So it does get a little more expensive with the made in the USA. Of course, that's to be expected. Now, they did, I think it was last year, they did the Gen 2. They were calling it the new and improved. They didn't want you to use the Gen 1, Gen 2 naming logos there, but I'm going to use them anyways for this video. And of course, they added oil resistant, slip resistant, non-marking, electrical hazard, I think it's called, the EH on there. They had a bunch of stuff for these boots, and they really did a good improvement. Now, of course, everyone still complained, well, they're not made in the USA. They're not made in the USA. I think they're made in Cambodia. That's where the Gen 2 was made, and the Gen 1 was made in China. It's funny, when you compare these tags, check out the tag in the Gen 1 here. It looks pretty basic, made in China, standard boot, kind of any company can go and do that. Then you got the Gen 2, really kicked it up a notch. You got a much nicer interior. Of course, you got the same soles in there. They added a little bit cooler liner in there. And then we move on to the latest made in the USA Gen 3. Kicks it up a notch. Of course, we've got much more standard sizing stuff in here, made in the USA. And of course, it's going to be built in the USA with globally sourced components. That makes sense because, of course, you can't really source every single thing that goes in this boot in the USA. Of course, that makes sense to me. A lot of boots you're going to find that are purely made in the USA. If you want something that's 100% everything made in the USA, I mean, you're talking, I think, like, I don't really know a lot of the brands, but it's going to be probably starting at $600, $700, $800 for that kind of stuff, where it's all custom, handmade, everything is sourced USA. Gets pretty wild price points at that point. But for $300, though, this is not terrible for something that's going to be Goodyear welted, made in the USA, comp toe. I do kind of like this new ultra dark brown. I think this is going to wear pretty cool. It looks black. Even in person, it looks black. And I got like a little bit of studio lighting on here. Here, let me take this can of Flex Seal. Here is black. You can kind of, I mean, this is like as dark of a brown as you can call a dark brown before it hits black. I mean, that is a very, very dark brown, but I think it's going to wear pretty nicely. I think it's going to look pretty cool. I really like the tan on the previous version. It's always been kind of cool. You can see the Gen 1 has been, pretty heavily used on that, so it's definitely got a bit darker of a tone to it. I didn't really wear the Gen 2s that much, and then I've now worn the Gen 3s, I think, twice now, and I wanted to kind of talk about all three of them kind of put together here. Comfort-wise, break-in time, they're all about the same, which I've noticed. They're not like a standard boot where you're like, okay, I gotta wear these around the house for a couple of days to a week before I actually wear it on a job site and go. These are actually pretty standard where it's like, hey, you kind of can just wear them around the house for at least one day. After that, they break in pretty quick, which is nice. So that's pretty cool. The Gen 3, they've really added a ton of stuff on here. The Goodyear welting, they've added a ton more stuff. I'll put up some more stuff on the screen here as well. All new tread pattern on the bottom too, which I think it's a lot more beefy. If you're buying, tires for like your truck, you can definitely tell here you got a lot thicker of a tread pattern here. This will wear out a lot slower than something like the Gen 2 here, which of course has a lot, it's not as, raised as a pattern here. The Gen 3 here definitely is pretty sweet. Now, I might be wrong on this one, but I'm pretty sure it's part of the Goodyear welting here, this stitching here. I think this is this a good thing? This stitching to be this exposed like this on the bottom of the sole of the shoe? I don't know. I think this might start, coming undone here pretty quick as this starts to wear on the top of your shoe. This is an easy wear spot here right at the top, by your toes. So I don't know about that exactly. That's going to be interesting to see what happens there with that over time. Weight-wise, I was kind of curious about that. How much did we increase of weight or decrease weight going from Gen 1 to Gen 3? Let's find out. So our first one is going to be 1 pound, 15.5 ounces for Gen 1. Let's see here. Gen 2 goes to 2 pounds, 3.5 ounces. So adding a bit of weight there. Not a ton, but we're adding weight. And 2 pounds, 6.2 ounces. So yeah, with each new model, we are adding weight. Now, I would say that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're only adding a couple ounces with each generation here. Of course, you add in a better Goodyear Welt instead of glue. That's going to weigh more, of course. I wouldn't mind seeing more weight. That's kind of what I was hoping to see from this when I did the weight comparisons here. Because, of course, as you go to a better made boot, you're going to gain weight. You're going to gain better quality materials. Lightweight materials don't necessarily are a better material unless they're going to be super expensive. We're not making boots out of carbon fiber, of course. But we're probably going to add in a lot thicker leather in these boots, of course. The quality is definitely going to go up. It's hard to tell exactly when you go from, say, the Gen 1 to the Gen 3 when it comes to the quality of leather. I do like how we're adding some more of the cushioning here, kind of around your ankle here. It's not really apparent on the Gen 1 nor on the Gen 2, are very similar there. And, there's a lot of, kind of fun stuff there to really go over when it comes to kind of the leather quality, the cushioning, the stitching. There's a lot of differences there. But I feel like the Goodyear Welt is going to be a big, big thing for Brunt here really quick. And of course, they've got a not made in the USA version of this. If you want to save a little bit of money, you can do that too. And I think it's about $100 cheaper. So pretty interesting stuff here with Brunt. Now, I don't want to necessarily say that, hey, yes, the Gen 3 made in the USA, it's got to be better, right? It's got the Goodyear Welt, got to be that. I want to wear this boot for a little bit. Of course, wear it on some jobs, see how well it performs, see how well it holds up. If anything starts failing, I'll know pretty quick. And we're going to go from there. So kind of introducing this and showing off, the first gen, second gen, and then the third gen boot. But you got to give credit to Brunt for that, making sure they're making improvements. And as Brunt, of course, keeps making these improvements, I think that's a pretty cool thing. When I first reviewed these Brunt boots, the Gen 1s, a couple of years back, I was kind of like, okay, here we go. Here's another, boot company that's just going to come out there and make some Chinese boots and try to gain a bunch of Facebook marketing. That's what they're trying to do. And that's what a lot of people did say initially. But it was cool that when they went to the Gen 2, they addressed a lot of issues. And I'm not going to say it was me that said, hey, these are super slippery boots. This is definitely not going to work. It probably wasn't me. It probably was a couple other influencers that were saying it too. And they were saying, hey, this is a slippery boot. We need to improve the sole in this. And they did it. They did it, And then, of course, everyone's like, well, they're not made in the USA. They're not made in the USA. They're not made in the USA. And everyone was just yelling it in all their Facebook ads all the time. Well, Brunt did it. They went and made a made in the USA boot, of course, with global materials, but they did it, and they're focusing on, whatever people are complaining about, they're trying to fix that. So whether you like Brunt or not, I'd say give them credit for that. At least they're trying to fix the stuff that everyone complains about. I think it's a pretty cool thing that Brunt's doing. If you're wondering, hey, what Brunt boot do I wear the most? I'll show you. I pretty much wear the Omans the most. And this is my everyday work boot right here. I've actually got two of these. I've got the comp toe and the soft toe. I absolutely love these things. Chelsea boot, this is kind of my style. I wear these things daily, jobs, not going to a job, wherever I'm going. These are my absolute go-to boots. I love the slip, just kind of slide them on like a regular shoe and you're good to go. So if you're wondering, hey, well, Indiana, you don't necessarily wear the Marins all the time. What do you wear? This is what I wear. So I do wear actually Brunt boots every single day. This is my favorite one by far. So you got to hand it to Brunt for, putting their money where their mouth is and saying, hey, you guys want Goodyear Welt, you guys want made in the USA, well, here you go. And that's what they did. So that's pretty cool that Brunt actually came back and did that. I'll give them credit for that, definitely. Now, let's see if this thing holds up. I'm going to wear this thing for the next couple of months, see what happens, see how the sole wears, see what other stuff wears here, and we'll check back in with you guys and see what happens with this boot. Does it hold up? Is it worth a $300 entry point to this boot? Let's find out, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Brunt now that they've got a made in the USA boot. And guys, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a great day. Stay safe out there.